7 years. That's how long it took Disney Star Wars to recover from the shellacking it took over the sequel trilogy and summon the strength to put out another Star Wars movie. And boy, did they pick the wrong one to start their comeback. Don't get me wrong, The Mandalorian and Grogu is not a terrible movie, though it does have its share of serious flaws. But it's hard to imagine a Star Wars story that is more irrelevant to the larger Star Wars universe, or that has lower stakes, or even has less of a connection to its own TV show that spawned this movie. In the massive galaxy far, far away, there are hundreds, if not thousands of stories more deserving of the big screen than this one. And Star Wars movie releases used to be events on a worldwide scale with an inescapable buzz around them. But thanks to a bafflingly terrible marketing campaign and Disney perhaps finally reaping what they sowed with the sequel trilogy and their Disney Plus flops, The Mandalorian and Grogu seemed destined to land with all the fanfare of a wet fart, which was pretty much what we got. And we'll talk more about just how wet that fart is after we recap the story. So strap yourselves in because we're about to blast off into spoiler territory. We catch up with Mando taking down leaders of the Imperial Remnant on behalf of the New Republic, which doesn't seem too busy doing any work of their own. They're all just hanging around their tropical oceanfront retirement home and paying Mando to do all the work like he's a landscaper. While they sip mojitos, they send Mando out to meet with two Hutts on Nal Hutta, a brother and sister known as the Twins. In exchange for information on his next mark, the twins ask that Mando return Rada the Hutt to them, the all-natty beefcake son of the late Jabba the Hutt. On Shikari, which looks a little too much like Chicago for my tastes, Mando finds that Rada has made a name for himself as an arena fighter, working to earn his freedom from a crime lord named Lord Janu. When Rada resists Mando's attempt to free him, Mando and Grogu are captured when Mando's helmet inexplicably fails to filter out toxins, and Mando is forced to face Rada in the arena. The three manage to escape Janu's attempt at killing them, with Mando and Grogu then having to capture Rada to make him leave with them. In between learning more about Rada's daddy issues, Rada explains that the twins don't want him back, they want him dead, as he's the heir to his father's criminal empire. Before they leave the system, Rada also informs Mando that Lord Janu was the very Imperial officer he's looking for. Wow, I guess it is a small galaxy after all. Mando blasts in and grabs the Imperial and turns him into the New Republic before heading back to his shanty with Grogu for some time off. But not before sending Rada into hiding aboard a smuggler's ship. One dark and stormy night, a bounty hunter named Embo tracks down Mando, who gets captured for the second time in 15 minutes. Grogu is able to escape though, along with a handful of Babu Fricks. Now it's at this point with Mando and Grogu separated that the movie starts to feel a lot more childish, leaning into the cutesy antics you'd expect. Which really sucks, because the movie was just forming into a larger, cohesive story. Not exactly the time you want to derail it with kids' movie stuff. So Gogurt and the Fricks arm themselves and make ready to rescue Mando, who Embo delivers to the twins. There, we see that Rada has been captured too, and the twins remove Mando's helmet because this is probably the one scene that Pedro Pascal filmed himself. Mando gets trap-doored down into a water pit of monsters below where he faces a gargantuan dragon snake. Then Mando puts his helmet back on so John Wayne's grandson can do all the stunt work, and the snake manages to nick Mando before Grogu and the Fricks arrive to help him escape. They flee into the swampy forest, and Mando sends Grogu off-planet with the Fricks as he stays behind to fight off the horde of droids hunting them. But before long, he succumbs to his poisoned wound and collapses. His body is swarmed by bugs, but Grogu comes back in the nick of time to eat the bugs off of him and use the Force to heal his wounds. Then the movie takes about 15 minutes to show us Baby Yoda stuff, like Baby Yoda tending to Mando's body, finding a Yoda-style walking stick, dancing with fireflies, and building a Yoda-style hut to hide Mando. Then some old alien living in the swamp gives Grogu the very antidote he magically guesses Mando needs, which Grogu feeds to Mando. Then we have an admittedly touching scene where Grogu curls up under the arm of Mando as he's on the verge of death. The next morning, Mando is right as rain, and he and Grogu prepare to assault the Hutt's palace, choosing to finish the fight rather than to go on the run. They fly a ship right into the palace, which is a ridiculous scene, because we all know space fuel doesn't melt stone beams, but whatever. Once inside, they fight their way to the throne room, freeing Rada so he can face off with his aunt and uncle while Mando fights off Embo. The three fat Hutts collapse the floor below them in the course of their fighting, but Grogu saves Rada from falling with the Force, leaving the twins to fall below and get eaten by the dragon snake as Embo makes his escape. The Fricks return accompanied by a New Republic squadron, flying drunk after finally being spurred to get off their fat, lazy asses and do something. Mando tells them to airstrike his location, and Mando, Grogu, and Rada leap from the exploding palace as their bombs bring the whole thing down. They get picked up and the New Republic celebrates their flawless victory, where I don't think they even lost a random X-Wing in the assault. Back at the seaside retirement home, all the old, gray-haired New Republic soldiers call a base. They thank Mando before he and Grogu blast off toward their next adventure. The end. As I'm sure you've heard by now, this story is nowhere near being worthy of the big screen. It's nothing more than a 3-episode arc of The Mandalorian show stretched to fill up a movie's runtime. There are almost no stakes to speak of. The movie is basically just a loose collection of Mando and Grogu's bounty hunting adventures. It doesn't set up anything bigger coming down the line. It's not an important story in the larger Star Wars galaxy. It won't have any impact on the Star Wars galaxy, and it doesn't even really have any serious connections to the very show that birthed this movie. On that note, the movie absolutely assumes that you know all of these characters going in, as it doesn't take the time to introduce them or their backstories in any fashion. But on the same side of that coin, they seem to want to make this movie accessible to new viewers who won't feel like they missed out on anything going in. Which just leaves us with a movie that's entirely lacking of any kind of depth, while also not building up or developing its characters. Mando and Grogu don't see any kind of development of their bond. We've seen them go through all of this before, and their relationship plays out exactly the same as it does in the show. Mando is clad in impenetrable armor, so it's hard to get excited when he's just blasting a room full of stormtroopers. And Baby Yoda is Baby Yoda, and you know they're not going to harm a hair on his wrinkly, scrotum-esque head. So it's hard to get invested when you already know how this movie's gonna go. The first half of this movie, though low on stakes and importance, was pretty fun. It was action-packed, and if you're willing to set aside the importance of having a real story to tell, the pacing was fantastic, flying from one fight to the next. But right around the halfway point, this movie just tossed aside all the momentum it had going, sacrificed at the altar of Grogu's cuteness. Sure, there's no shortage of cute Baby Yoda moments from start to finish, but this thing came to a screeching halt to spend 15 minutes on pretty much just that. Now in the theater, the adult male to my left giggled every single time Grogu was on screen, so unfortunately Disney's ideal target audience for this movie does exist. But for the rest of us, this was a turning point where the movie lost all steam. The Mandalorian and Grogu's true failure, however, was in its marketing. Star Wars movie releases used to be an event, something that grabbed everyone's attention whether or not they even cared about Star Wars. This time though, the buzz just wasn't there. Call it malaise with the franchise, or the rotten fruit born from the tree of the sequel trilogy. But I have friends that are Star Wars fans who didn't even know a new movie was coming out. That's bad. Baby Yoda is more of a marketing vessel than a character at this point, and he was probably the only real marketing this movie had going for it. And it doesn't help that their idea of marketing was to send out their star on a press junket where he spent his time kissing dudes. The music was not very Star Wars-y. Most of it had this techno, futuristic synth tone, which was punctuated by various stingers of the Mando theme song that they must have played like 10 times. It felt a lot more like a Blade Runner soundtrack. Nal Hutta was a cool swamp planet, and Zeb from Rebels was good but underused. But Sigourney Weaver's role in this movie was overblown. She basically just operated as a mission terminal for the Mandalorian. Come here, pick up a quest, come back, turn in the quest, collect your reward. She's in like 3 scenes. There was one cool reference to this exact winning Djarik move from A New Hope, and there was something of an overarching theme about having to say goodbye one day, which was nice, even if the movie barely leaned into it. But of course, no music or cute Grogu gimmicks or marketing tricks in the world would have made this movie worthy of the big screen. It's a small-time story best left to Disney+, which is where I suspect the majority of viewers will end up watching this movie. On Rotten Tomatoes, where they use an easily abusable binary rating system, the movie is getting a highly misleading 89% from audiences. But viewers on Metacritic have the Mandalorian and Grogu at a much more accurate 6.1. The movie is expected to pull in $80 to $100 million over a long holiday weekend, so we'll see where it ends up. As for me, this movie is the definition of mid. What they gave us wasn't bad, but it was never a story that was worth giving us. At least not on the big screen. So I'd give this movie a 5 out of 10, and maybe a 6 on a day that I'm feeling generous. The Mandalorian and Grogu is okay at best. The absolute ceiling for a movie like this was always going to be just okay. Even the sequel trilogy had much higher ceilings than this movie, although those movies still found a way to crash through the floor. But Mando and Grogu played it safe, leaving us with an uninteresting adventure where they didn't even try and do anything out of the bounds of their Disney Plus TV show mindset. In terms of storytelling and impact on the larger Star Wars galaxy, this movie is definitely the weakest entry into the Star Wars movie library. And after 7 years, fans deserved far better for Star Wars' return to the big screen. Were you hoping for a better return to theaters for Star Wars? Do you think the giggling Grogu gang is large enough to make this movie successful at the box office? Let us know in the comments. And remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for making sad Grogu even sadder with me today, and I'll catch you on the next one.